There are three key ingredients to create the perfect wedding: the perfect partner, the perfect dress, and the perfect cake. Those of us in the know who guarantee perfection as a living go to Peggy Porschen for the latter. At her London studio and cake shop, she designs and creates mouth-watering cakes, perfect in detail and flavour.
I got into cake baking simply by a hobby, really. I've got sort of a lifelong passion and excitement about cakes, really. And when I was 14, I made my first birthday cake for somebody, which turned out quite well. I thought at the time, I was quite pleased. And then I always knew I wanted to be a pastry chef.
Peggy's designs are always fresh and current. She's a setter of trends. So what inspires her designs?
I get my ideas from all around me. The flowers, of course, are a big inspiration, but also jewellery, fashion, lace of a wedding dress. Most of the time, the clients actually come with a piece of inspiration which helps me to develop a cake design for them. And quite often that triggers a brand new idea. So, I find it quite interesting meeting with different people, and they inspire me to come up with new designs as well.
Could you tell us a little bit about the different types of cakes, the styles of cakes available to a couple?
I think the most commonly known is a stacked wedding cake. Right now I would say that the stacked American version is the most popular, which means the tiers are directly sitting on top of each other. Then there are also iced miniature cakes. They basically provide a twist on tradition because you can give an individual miniature cake to each guest. You can serve them as a dessert or give them away as a favour, whilst at the same time you still have a top tier which you can cut, so you don't lose your all-important cutting ceremony and the photography opportunity.
How do you start the process of choosing your wedding cake?
So the number of guests, your venue, if you're getting married in a grand venue with high ceilings, very traditional, the last thing you want is a tiny cake because it would go under. If you have a lot of guests also, for 300 people all around you while you're cutting the cake, you want the cake and yourself to be seen, so you need to go for a significant centerpiece. At the same time, an intimate wedding would require something much smaller, so these things are very important.
This beautiful, stunning decoration is not real. These are sugar. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tell me, how do you make them? How long does it take? How do you learn this skill?
These flowers are handcrafted sugar flowers, and each petal, for example, on every rose is shaped by hand. If you look at this big one, for example, it has about 35 individually crafted petals. And each flower is also made on a wire, which allows us to arrange it in a sort of cascading display.
And how long would, say, one of these roses take you?
One rose, approximately a size of this, will take roughly 1 hour.
An hour?
Yeah, it's quite a lot of time involved. All the flowers that you see on this cake took about between 1 and 2 weeks. I can't tell you exactly now, but they took a long time.
So I think what we're saying is if you've set your heart on this and you're on a limited budget, stop looking, because this is going to cost you.
Maybe instead.
Yeah, use fresh flowers. But that is stunning.
Thank you.
Stunning. When you meet your cake supplier, go armed with as much detail as you can.
Bring any information or any material that would be an inspiration to the cake. For example, a piece of a wedding dress or colour of a ribbon, for example. Then when she comes to the tasting, we first talk about the number of guests, the venue, the style that she's trying to achieve.
How do you decide what flavours to have? Can you have more than one flavour?
I always encourage my brides to have at least 2 choices of flavors in a wedding cake if you can. The reason being is there's so much to choose from these days, and personally I think it's a bit boring just going for chocolate or vanilla all the time, so why not spice it up a little bit and offer something more unusual?
And is it all about design, or does a truly gorgeous cake taste as good as it looks?
I think the taste of a cake is equally important as the look of a cake, because after the cake has been cut, the moment goes by fairly quickly. I've noticed at my own wedding. So basically, once the cake has disappeared, the only thing your guests will actually notice is the taste.
And how far in advance should you start thinking about your cake?
Well, I always recommend 3 to 6 months in advance. The thing is planning a cake, designing it, but also booking in and planning ahead for your work and deliveries. This all needs preparation, and peak time usually is from May to September. So I recommend, in particular for those months, always book 3 to 6 months in advance and try to secure your date with a deposit.
Pricing, what should you ask?
We have a price category divided into the sizes and the number of tiers, and then we build up on the level of detail and decoration that's involved. So I think ballpark is really find out a basic starting from price, and then bear in mind the more decoration you add, the more the cake will cost. If you're on a limited budget for your wedding cake, of course decide what your budget will be. Generally speaking, I think that plain iced cakes decorated with fresh flowers are usually the most cost-effective way to do a wedding cake.
How big should your wedding cake be? And is there such a thing as a cake that's too big?
We have made cakes. I think the biggest one is a 5-foot cake.
Sorry, say
A
that again.
5-foot cake.
5-foot cake?
But it was an international royal wedding, and I guess it suited the occasion because for certain members of society, the impact and impression they make on their guests is most important.
Yeah.
I think really just do what you feel comfortable with. I think sometimes if a bride and groom are leaning over a cake too much, it maybe doesn't look as nice on the picture, so maybe raise the cake a little bit with the cake stand. Too big, I think a cake is nice to be big, personally, but it's personal taste.
I think it's the photo opportunity.
Exactly,
It's
yes.
the celeb photo shot.
Totally.
What are your top tips?
I guess number 1 would be pick a good tasting cake. As we said before, you don't want everyone to say the cake looked amazing, but it tasted awful. So do go to cake makers and taste their flavors as well. If you're trying to find a good cake maker, go by recommendation, because when I started I felt by word of mouth it always works best for you as well as for the client. Do check out their websites and maybe ask for some informational material like brochures, so that you get a good idea of their collection, their prices, their service. Do they deliver? Do they offer setup and collection of the cake stand afterwards? Cake stand hire? All these things are quite important. Choose a cake maker for the right reasons. Choose them for what they're really good at.
The cutting of the cake at a wedding is the perfect photo opportunity. Use it too as a punctuation point, a moment to bridge seamlessly from one part of the celebration to another, perhaps before announcing the wedding breakfast or between the speeches before the first dance. And also bear in mind, particularly if you're serving cake as dessert, that it will be removed to the kitchen for slicing and plating, and that can take time.
A little trick that's often done in the trade really is that you have a bottom tier being made out of real cake, but the other tiers could be dummy tiers. Your guests wouldn't notice because they're decorated in ice in the same way, but the kitchen would already have pre-sliced cutting cakes ready to be served as soon as you have cut your cake, and this way it really helps speeding up the process.
You, a family member or friend, may be baking your cake, but there are dangers, even for the most enthusiastic amateur, and not just in the baking, but also in the delivery and setup. Make sure you talk it through and trust this task only to the most reliable.
The only thing that's really important to remember is stability of a cake. Use the heavier, stronger tiers and flavors at the bottom, and the lighter, more fragile tiers at the top. Never fill a cake with fresh cream or berries or something like that, because if you want to ice a wedding cake, these types of cakes are simply not suitable for this sort of thing. So make sure you dowel your cake properly. Also transportation, if you feel the cake is fragile, stack it rather at the venue last minute, and also make sure that it's sitting on a strong cake stand and a sturdy table.
And if you're planning a marquee wedding, think about the weather.
I think a marquee can get easily very hot when the sun is shining in summer, so set up the cake as last minute as you can. Do choose flavors which are a little bit stronger. Maybe chocolate isn't ideal if it can melt.
Peggy, if you could give just one piece of advice, what would it be?
It's a difficult one, but I think the biggest advice I can give, go with your gut feeling. If there's one cake you always wanted, no matter how much you try and shop around, people end up going back to that one. So think about what you want and don't try to please everyone else. I know that's what a bride naturally wants to do, what I try to do, but after all, it's your wedding, it's this one photo and it's the flavor and everything else. You have to have it right for you, so go with your gut feeling.